looking at a competitive platform, you're like, well, so-and-so is doing this, we're going to do it too. It's like, but how effective is that? What problems are they solving? Are they just running an A/B test that might be failing? You don't know.
We know what a good user experience is. It doesn't, regardless of the way in which technology is changing and things are moving underneath of us, we know that we need to provide a good experience for customers. And a lot of that comes straight from just having conversations with them.
Because sometimes it feels like the earth is spinning faster than it should be. Things move so fast in capitalism.
Welcome to Impressive Hosting, where we uncover the core tenets of great WordPress hosting. I am your host, Jesse Friedman. Before we dive in, remember to check out impressive.host. It's where you can comment on episodes, ask follow-up questions, and submit questions for upcoming guests. You'll also find all our links to follow, like, and subscribe wherever you listen. With me is Jeff Golenski, a very close friend, colleague, and someone who knows a whole lot about product management, design, user experience, and helping agencies to be successful online. I mentioned before that you can go to impressive.host to ask questions. I think a lot of you are going to have some follow-up questions for Jeff, because what we were talking about in the last episode, was around what a hosting company needs to do to better attract agencies and help them to be successful. But we're also talking about what agencies need to do to help with their customers, to help them, sell better within the WordPress ecosystem, to keep them within the WordPress ecosystem, all that. So if you have any other follow-up questions for Jeff, I am hanging out with him in person enough that I can actually punch him in the arm or something if he doesn't answer. So I'll make sure you get an answer to your question.
I was
Jeff,
resorting to violence. Come on, Jesse. I'm happy to answer
not
questions.
always, just with you.
I mean, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn and Blue Sky, so if y'all have any questions, feel free to reach out. Happy to help.
Yeah, that's perfect. All right. So before we jump back into what we were talking about, it's funny because you are always at the cutting edge of technology and design and everything else. And it's funny because you also kind of balance that as a juxtaposition within your own life, where you're very connected to the planet and you're very connected to nature. And I feel like you work incredibly hard within your working hours to be on the cutting edge of things. And then you drop it all and you disappear into the forest with a fat tire bike, or you're kayaking or doing something like that.
That's true.
Yeah. So, like just on a personal aspect for anybody who's listening at home, how do you balance that? Like, how does that work for you in terms of unplugging and like reconnecting, regrounding yourself? Like, I think that anyone who's listening to this podcast can benefit from that these days.
Yeah, it's incredibly difficult, and I think it takes an extreme amount of discipline over time to figure that out. Like, my laptop doesn't leave my office, right? And my phone, I put away at night, make sure it's away from the bed, things like that when I can. But like, I don't know, especially around nature, it's like I try if I'm going for a hike, phone stays in the backpack unless I need it as my camera, right? But like just staying away from that, I think is incredibly difficult. And I find it very important to have hobbies that are away from tech. I mean, as much as I love technology, I think it's extremely important to get away, because sometimes it feels like the earth is spinning faster than it should be. Things move so fast in capitalism. It
Yeah,
can be
it's no
pretty
kidding.
daunting at times, and it can be draining. So I find that very important.
It's funny because you and I work in this industry. It feels very much like sometimes, I think when you and I were coming up, at least, like we felt very much like we had to be super connected outside of work as well, because how could we possibly be good at our jobs if we're not, um, you know, spending our free time reading about what's coming next and testing out the new things and trying out the new technologies and everything else. And like the reality of the situation, I think, is that like there's a lot of definite truths that exist out there that allow you to kind of like rely on that. So like we know what a good user experience is. It doesn't, regardless of the way in which technology is changing and things are moving underneath of us, we know that we need to provide a good experience for customers. And a lot of that comes straight from just having conversations with them. Before we get into that though, and I want to segue into talking about like your role as a product manager and what that means. But just on the point of technology moving around and kind of unplugging a little bit more, one of the things that I'm actually excited for, I just got to notice that it's being shipped in the mail, is that I bought a minimal phone. It's a e-ink screen and it has a BlackBerry keyboard type keyboard. So it has a physical QWERTY keyboard. I'm excited for that because I was always interested in these e-ink displays. I have a remarkable tablet for taking notes and journaling and things like that. But the QWERTY keyboard, I think, yeah, exactly. I think a QWERTY keyboard was necessary for an e-ink display because, like, I still want to be able to text my wife or my daughter or you and say, like, I'm coming to something, I'm doing something. I don't want to be waiting for an e-ink display to slow me down there. But I do like the idea of an e-ink display kind of like intentionally slowing me down in terms of like the way in which I browse the internet and the doom scrolling and all that stuff. But on the other side of it, we got Apple releasing, its glass design, or what's that called? The liquid glass, right? Uh,
Yeah, for sure. It's really interesting. Just to dive back to what you were just saying, I think wrote a blog post a few years ago. It's probably closer to a decade now. But thinking about how we experience technology has always been super curious to me. Like now, if we're sitting here like on our screens and we're just looking at browsers, most of the time we're just invoking like our sense of vision, right? But when we talk about devices, a lot of people are using more microphones, so they're invoking like their voice, and the physical keyboard is more of a texture and a sense of touch. And so our complete experience changes based on these different devices that we used. And I think your level of joy can also change because the more senses that we invoke, I think the better the experience. So if we talk about things like eating, for example, right? There's a theory that, if you use like utensils and things, you're not getting the full experience because, yeah, your sense of taste is involved, but you're using a device that disconnects you from the food. Whereas if you use your hands, the sense of touch and texture raises the level of enjoyment. It's really interesting stuff if you really want to get into a meta
that,
conversation about
that is
experience.
interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that must be why I like Ballpark Frank so much because you eat them with your hands. Yeah, but so like that's really interesting. So like like and we're now getting to a place like I remember when responsive web design and Ethan Marcotte came out with that article and was talking about how we needed to be ready for that, and then
Mhm.
then everybody started trying to design for individual devices, and they said like it was a Bruce Lee quote, which I think was actually like taken from The Art of War or something, where it's just like be like water,
Oh
right?
yeah,
Like just kind of like just
you got
like
to adapt. Yep.
fit to the form of the device. But now we're not just talking about the size and the shape of the window. We're talking about the actual physical way in which the device is interacting with the website or the app or whatever. So I'm interested to try this app out. Apple's glass design. Explain what that is, because you and I were talking about that off the air. It's basically what it like makes it look like it's transparent by using the camera. Is that what's going on?
Yeah, it's like it's all the rage this week. What's fascinating about this, and I don't think I need to explain it too in depth. If anyone is listening to this podcast, I'm sure that they've seen it somewhere online just this week. And it's like what we're seeing is over the past several decades, like designers are like rediscovering, things that previous designers designed decades ago. And I remember like this whole glass thing was started. I remember back in like 2000, 2001 when I was just a kid getting into web design and like I worked and modified this JavaScript applet to like have like a Ripley water glass effect on top of my website, which was terrible for performance and accessibility, but it was super cool. And now I'm seeing like this is coming back after all these years, and it's
Yeah.
both interesting, but it's also my concern with a lot of these things as a designer is, again, you talked about the web becoming kind of sterile. And I almost think it's like becoming like this monoculture sometimes where group of designers, especially, you have these influential folks working at companies like Apple, where they do something, it becomes so popular that everyone just copies it, and then everything is just the same. Uh, so it's fascinating how our society works in that regard, and it reminds me of if we dive back to like 2015 or so years ago when like CSS Zen Guard and the web standards started coming around, bulletproof web design, and we had like this really flourishing community where everyone was trying so hard to be unique, and I think there was so much fun in that, and I feel like not to be depressing about it, but it seems like we're losing some of that, and we have lost some of that. I think I believe it was Luke Dorney who built wrote an article maybe like a few years ago. It was like about the web that we lost, and talked a lot about how we've lost a lot of that uniqueness and
Yeah.
creativity.
Yeah, I think that I was actually thinking about something talks about like how I'm not on social media, so I'm not actually following this stuff as much. I was actually looking at something that might have been a little bit different in the way in which Apple was like using the camera to kind of display what it sees behind it as the background
Oh,
of
sure.
the
Yeah, yeah.
phone. You're talking about the glass design of like the texture and the layout that they've released now is like the super sexy sleek way in which the icons look, and they're very simple and subtle, and they kind of looks like a liquid display, right? Like so. Yeah, two sides of the same coin, I guess maybe I don't know, but yeah. So their innovation is through watching and replicating, maybe because we see this in fashion and everything else, right? Like it comes back, it's cyclical.
Oh,
We
sure.
see this with the internet as well, and I love this idea that we're maybe returning to a weird open web and all that, and maybe some of this stuff will allow for us to have the cool Angel Fire type fonts or whatever back and all that. But yeah, so I'm just like I'm just thinking like where where innovation comes into play for you, you're taking feedback from agencies and end customers, and you're listening and you're spending your time hearing what it is, watching the way in which they work, and then you're converting that into actual roadmap items, what it is that engineers and designers need to create to help improve these experiences. So you're basically innovating based on the feedback that you're receiving. Is this something that you feel like all hosting companies should be doing? Uh, and how does that play into your day to day?
I think it's something everybody should, regardless of who you are. If you're building something online, in any industry, really, if it's the automotive industry, culinary, whatnot, right? It's like there's a set of problems that people have come across and they need those problems solved. How do we fix those problems? Very high level, right? So what we try and do is focus on determining what the most impactful problems are, where we're seeing, these reoccurring themes happening, what agencies need to do, and we're just trying to build solutions for that. And we're trying to be innovative while we do those things. We want to be able to create things that are expected, they're needed, but are new and fun as well. So I think there's a lot of considerations there.
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting because the reason I asked that question, and maybe I should have worded it better because I think, yeah, it was very obvious. Obviously, yes, if you're building something on the internet, you should be making sure that you're working with your end customers. But at the same time, we have to remember that a lot of the hosting industry is so first of all, we have resellers, right? So there's a lot of people who are marketing things that they're actually not building. We
Hmm.
have people who are working in this industry who spend a lot of time just opening up their competitors' websites and their competitors' platforms and mirror what they're doing. And I think I mean I see this a lot where there's a lot of assumption that
Hmm.
the pioneers, the leaders in the industry know exactly what they're doing, and so they just start to mimic exactly what they're doing. And so I get nervous that sometimes that innovation, like, we mentioned this thing with Apple, like they're bringing back something that's retro, but Apple also has this like history of watching what Android's doing and then releasing it as innovative and amazing, but in reality it's been already been out for a few years. Like I remember when like the panoramic camera view came out, like Android had that for years, but Apple touted it as like the most amazing thing that's ever happened. So I get, the more it's very much, it's a lot more specific in the hosting industry, but I get a little nervous that there's a lot of people kind of just watching, and that's their level of innovation is just through watching, not necessarily working directly with end customers.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think there needs to be a balance. I mean, everyone looks at what everyone else is doing, of course, but you take a lot of risk, I think, when you do that. Like if you're looking at a competitive platform and you're like, well, so and so is doing this, we're going to do it too. It's like, but how effective is that? What problems are they solving? Are they just running an A/B test that might be failing? You don't know.
That's
It's like,
exactly right. Yeah.
Jill, let's just circumvent that. That's just a lot of wasted time and opportunity, and let's just discover what the actual problems are and solve for those problems. So I
Yeah.
think the best way to do that, I mean, from my history in design, I've always been really curious on like, how do I know what I'm designing is solving the problems it needs to solve. Sure, I want to make it look great, but UX is always a major concern for me. And if it's not fixing what it needs to fix, then it's bad design, right? So I think a lot of what I've tried to do over my career is validate that work. And, whether that's user research prior or if that's looking at quantitative data after to see what people are doing and how they're using the thing, I think that can really help guide those problem solutions.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, a lot of what we do for hosting companies with the WP Cloud team is to make sure that they are getting the ability and empowered by WP Cloud to run their business the way they want to go to market the way they want to. And WP Cloud operates underneath that as an API layer to allow them to kind of, differentiate themselves in the market through, any number of means. They can segment their customers, they can create niches, they can do different hosting plans, something super innovative and unique. And we'll focus on the infrastructure, the speed, and all that stuff, and let you do, what you do best, which is connect with your end customer. And I think that that's something that's is reflective in the work that you're doing with A for A, right? Like, you guys know that what you're selling is something that's built on a platform that's going to be reliable, safe, and secure, and so it becomes you're spending a lot less time trying to convince people about the underlying infrastructure probably, and spending more time trying to relate to them around their workflows and the way in which they operate and the tools that they're using to help them to be more successful. And that's a common theme that we see throughout this podcast, is that as we start to uncover what is super important for a hosting company to be successful, it's a lot about this aligning of success. They align their success to the success of their end customer. And I think that you can see that really, it's very evident when you look at a hosting company who's very focused on just acquiring customers. They're just using advertising to bring in customers as fast as they can. And they don't have this responsibility or self-appointed responsibility to the end customer's success and to the WordPress ecosystem. They just care about the bottom line. Let's bring in customers, and we know we have some level of churn, but we're still going to make a lot of profit. But when you think about the way in which A for A works, this is you taking a product that's built by two other hosting companies, then you're building a layer on top of that provides solutions and tools to help agencies be more successful on top of those things. So it's really interesting because how much of your work is actually impacting the way in which hosting is delivered or the way in which these tools are delivered, or are you really more focused on taking things that are built by other people and making them work for agencies, and kind of adapting them to the needs of these customers?
It's a great question. It's really mainly, I would say it's about improving efficiencies. So again, like you mentioned, we kind of connect the dots between all these different products within the Automattic world. So it's really helping agencies understand you're going to get the best hosting, of course, but you also need tools to enhance the functionality of your site. So let's see how Pressable and Woo can work best together, right? To just give you that one-stop solution. So there are multiple layers on top of that. And I think depending on the agency, we work with them all in different ways to help them understand that and also help their clients understand that. So there's a
Yeah.
lot.
And how does that impact, like, what is the role of a product manager in that way? Like, what are you doing day to day to make the product better?
A lot of what we're doing within Automatic for agencies, again, is building another layer on top of all these products. So we're building things like I mentioned the referral stuff, being able to purchase and manage all your products in one space, which is great. Um, we want to build these tools that really help enhance. Again, I mentioned like we have the two layers of customers. We have the agencies and their clients. We want to help agencies reinforce their value to their clients, building things like a reporting system to help build that trust between clients and agencies. And then we offer like the site management tools and things like that, plugin management, security tools, and all that through Jetpack as well. So it's really like a really comprehensive suite. I think the beauty of it all is, again, all these agencies have these established workflows, or maybe not, maybe they're fresh, but most of the time they have these established workflows. And we want to really allow that flexibility. So it's like, sure, we want you to host with us because we have the best hosting that's built specifically for WordPress, of course. I'm sorry if this sounds like an ad, but if you want to be part of our program and you have hosting with a third party, that's fine with us. You can come in and still get those benefits through us. Totally cool.
Yeah, it speaks to something that, we talk about within this podcast often because of the fact that I work on WP Cloud, and a lot of times we interview somebody from Automattic. There's this power in the diversity of hosting, right? It challenges us to be better as a ecosystem. And so, a lot of times Automattic could take the position of saying like, no, this is only going to operate within our tool set, and, create that kind of walled garden the way in which Apple does, and that, you know, creating bespoke plugs so that like, you can't charge your phone unless you're using an Apple certified device or whatever. Right? Like Automattic could have taken that position years ago, but it didn't. What it did was it said, we're going to create a higher standard of excellence, work on these products in a way that, we can then educate the rest of the ecosystem and say, this is the standard we're setting. This is where what we're working on, and we're going to make it available to you. Like, you think about the genesis of like the Jetpack plugin, regardless of how you feel about the Jetpack plugin, like that is a plugin that serves millions of customers with free services
Mhm.
that cost Automattic millions of dollars. And we do it because we want to ensure that the WordPress experience is as good as it can be. Right. And so one of the more complex things out there is setting up a CDN, right? Like if you're a business owner and you have no idea how to set up a CDN, you don't know how to, turn on your computer sometimes. The idea that you're going to,
You shut your computer off? I haven't shut my computer off in years,
this is
man.
exactly what I'm talking about. These services are perfect for you, Jeff. Um, no, but like, you think about the fact that like we have this very low barrier of entry into WordPress. It's not hard to get set up. All you need is a credit card to build a website these days. And then you're being told like your site's not performant, you need to speed it up. Well, the best way to do that is get a CDN. Think about how hard that is for someone who has no idea what they're doing, right? And so then we start to think about the ways in which we can integrate that directly into our services. WP Cloud comes directly integrated with a CDN out of the box. You can't use it without it, honestly.
Mhm.
Or maybe you can, but that's not the point. The point is that it comes directly integrated so that we are solving these problems for these customers in the end. But Jetpack has its image accelerators, it used to be called Photon, right? And it's an image uh, content delivery network for specifically for images. Now it does like JavaScript and CSS static files, things like that. But it the fact that Automattic gave that out to the WordPress community, think about how much that costs to run, right? Across millions of sites that are using this every single day. And so it speaks to this idea that like, we're not there's enough WordPress for everybody, right? There's plenty of competition that makes us all better, but at the end of the day, like we can all still work together in a way that provides a great WordPress experience without sacrificing that in the face of competition. So I think it's really great that A4A kind of works with no matter who, whoever you're bringing to the table in terms of a hosting company.
Yeah, we're
Um,
definitely the USB-C of agency programs. But it's interesting. You went on a nice long explanation about CDNs, and to just tie back our conversation earlier, it's like what's the whole purpose of a CDN, right? It's to make a site as performant as it can be, right? And so agencies are concerned with that because they have to. I mean, they just want a site to work and be online all the time and be as fast as it can be. And they really have to dive down into the technical levers to make it all happen. And part of my job is to make that as automated as possible, right? So,
yeah, very cool. Yeah. I like that. I mean, we used to, when you and I worked on the Jetpack team together, we used to talk about these things as light switch features, this idea that it just works and all the configuring and all that other stuff is optional. Like it just, you flip the switch and it just operates. And then you can go in, if you have more experience, you can go in and solve for it later. And I think that's a lesson that a hosting company can take is that like, you can provide an experience to an end customer
mhm.
that is simultaneously opinionated and helping them to solve a specific problem, but kind of makes it accessible by anyone, no matter what level of experience they have. And then, based on your level of experience, you can kind of expose additional features and settings and configurations to allow them to do like some fine tuning and things like that. But having it work as a light switch feature out of the box is something I think every hosting company can benefit from, whether it's a CDN, caching, DDoS protection, WAF, whatever.
Yeah, it's for all of my fellow design nerds who might be watching or listening, that the term of progressive disclosure, right? It's like you only reveal certain features or functionality when it's relevant to the user at that explicit time. So it's very
Yeah,
important. I think there's also an education aspect to it. Like I'm a huge fan, like WordPress.com just released a new performance tool. And sure, there are all these tools you can do. There's like performance monitoring. It can tell you on any given day versus another day when your site was more or less performant based on everything from servers to image compression, right? And then if something isn't that performant, they'll tell you why and how you can fix it. So in the future, if it's user related, you can then prevent that from happening, right? If you're uploading images or video that aren't compressed or optimized, in the future you can prevent that because there's also aside from the hosting, there's also the human error that can happen too. So
sure. Yeah. All right, so we talked a lot about like what a hosting company would want to hear in terms of how to communicate with agencies and the benefit of a product manager to help innovate on their product line. Let me ask you a question that let's get into some secret sauce here. If I'm if you can relate to this, imagine you're just not just imagine you're a designer who is focused purely on designing, and that's the only thing that you do. Maybe you design logos, brands, you maybe design a website or something, but then you pass it off to somebody else, and you're thinking to yourself like, I can't get into running a full blown agency. I can't do the hosting. I can't do the development and all that stuff. What would you tell that person today? Like, has things changed? Like, do we have enough tools now, AI hosting that comes like bundled with all the pieces, the functionality you need? Like, can someone who has just like design experience suddenly start running a full blown agency?
of course, we see a lot of design-led agencies too. We have a few that we work with often. I think to get back to your current, your prior point, like I think there are too many tools available, and that's part of what's daunting, especially in the WordPress ecosystem, right? Choice is now it has like a double-edged sword where there's too much, there's decision paralysis, and there's a lot of time and effort that may be wasted trying to discover the best tool, the most efficient tool. Um, and what we see is like a lot of agencies simply don't have the time to dig through all the different plugins that are available or hosting that's available. And so part of our job is to tell them what tools are the best for different jobs and things like that.
Yeah.
Um, to talk more about your design, I don't know if you have any more specific questions about that to help me kind of
Well,
tailor
so
my
like
response.
let's say like let's say I'm a designer and I'm currently getting some work off of Fiverr or something like that, right? And like and I'm designing landing pages or I'm designing logos or whatever.
Hmm.
And I keep getting questions like, "Hey, can you just make this into a website for me?" And their answer is maybe no because I don't have the technical experience to do that. What advice would you give them to maybe say like, "Hey, you can actually expand your business into running all the components that are needed to build a website and run the hosting and everything." Like, I guess I'm kind of like giving you the floor to speak to like the value that A4A delivers or other agency programs that maybe like empowers someone who's currently focused on a very specific solution that maybe can expand into a wider area of business and actually grow and evolve.
Hmm. Yeah, I think as if we're halfway through the 2020s now, it's a lot of the tools, especially in the WordPress ecosystem, are a lot easier to build with. Again, we mentioned early on in the call, it was like when WordPress came about, it was very dev focused. The reason I've got into it, I was a designer at first and I became a front end engineer just so I could build with WordPress, right? Customize my themes. And before I knew it, I was writing PHP and all that sort of thing. So now, especially as a designer getting into the market, like I think it's a bit easier in terms of all the tools that are available, whether you're talking about the block editor with WordPress or you're talking about Framer or Figma just released their site functionality. And I think building is a lot easier. In the hosting aspect, I think it's just once you find a good host, you don't need to worry about it too much. You set it up, you get your site spun up, you start building, and then you can just focus on delivering the solution to if you have clients and things like that. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
Yeah, it does. And I think it's interesting to think that like, as an if I'm a designer, uh, you know, I guess the advice I would give them is find, I'm biased, right? But I'd say
Mhm,
find a
mhm.
WP Cloud powered partner, whether that's Pressable or WordPress.com or Bluehost Cloud or Convesio, or the list goes on in terms of those partners. Find someone like that because they're going to take care of all the hard parts of hosting for you, and then layer on top of that the services that you want to provide to help solve, building out a website. There's so many AI tools out there now that I feel like, you can get to a place where you're taking designs and branding and you're good at that stuff and you're good at tweaking and styling things that you can rely on these other site builder tools to kind of get you most of the way there. Use the WordPress site editor to kind of do all the tweaking and the specific things that you need to do to change that design to kind of fit your client's profile. I feel like at this point, if you're if you're only doing one small aspect of a larger web design portfolio, it's probably because it's just your passion. That's what you love to do. But I feel like the tools and the hosting and everything else has been solved in a way that you can expand into that anytime.
Yeah, I think a lot of what you're describing too, it's sort of like a bandwidth issue. When I say bandwidth, I don't mean in terms of like speed or loading times or anything. I'm talking about it used to be if you had an idea, you would need to take a lot of time to realize that idea, whether that be through coding or whatnot, right? Even designers, you would need to take time in whatever design tool. Back in the day, it was Photoshop or Sketch or whatever, and it would take a long time to realize that idea. Now you have an idea, and then you've got all these AI tools like Cursor that can just handle that bandwidth issue for you, right? You have an idea,
Right.
maybe it's for an additional WordPress, and you want to build like a cool block for the editor. You know how to code, but you really want to see this functionality built into it. You can just have a tool like that build it for you, and then
Yeah.
your idea gets realized so much quicker. So I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree. And I think it's empowering because a lot of times people are saying like AI is going to take us out of the job market, but I think what it's actually going to do is empower the people to do a lot more than they ever could before. And I look at something like the other day I tested Bluehost Cloud's AI site builder,
Hmm.
and it was cool because I gave it a prompt. I said basically that I'm an author and I'm building a website to kind of showcase my books, and it launched a full blown website powered by WordPress on WP Cloud in minutes, and it had all this dummy content in there and everything, and it completely erased the blank canvas problem. And then I think about like automatics, like Big Sky, like it's doing the same thing. Like it's taking a slightly different approach, looking at it from a different perspective, but still using AI to take in your feedback and turn it into a WordPress powered website that uses blocks and everything else. And when you eliminate that blank canvas problem, like you're helping DIYers. But I think what's really interesting is that we're getting to a place where maybe people are commercializing that. Like I think it would be really interesting to see like if you take on a new client and you're like, hey, I'm only offering this $4,000 website package. It gets you like 6 templates and a blog or whatever. And they say, well, I only have $200 and I don't know how to do this stuff and I don't want to become a web designer. You could maybe you take that $200, but you just let AI do the work for you, and everybody's happy. Like I, I think there's a way for us to kind of like leverage this stuff to kind of expand your business and maybe take on work that you know normally would not have taken on. Because it's funny to me because it's like, you think about these agencies and they think that they're like, I'm not taking work that's that low, and it's because it's not worth it, right? The juice is not worth the squeeze. Um, but if you're using AI to handle that stuff and you're charging so little that it's managing the expectation that you're not giving white glove service, maybe you can take on 20 of those in the same time it would take you to do one of those $4,000 projects, and now you're still making the same amount of money, and you're kind of balancing that out. So it's interesting to think about these tools that are being used for the purposes of like building yourself a website. Is like maybe you can actually repurpose them and commercialize them.
Yeah, maybe. I wonder if there's any ethical implications there in terms of, setting expectations if you're trying to expand your business a bit. And let's say you're working with a new client and they want you to do X, Y, or Z, and you use AI to do the thing, and then they want you to do A, B, and C, and you're like, well, I can't do that, because AI is limited,
Because the
and you
AI
haven't
won't
just
do it for me.
right, like, yeah, right, I want images of Disney, and it's like I can't do. Yeah, I don't have any concrete examples right now, but I'm wondering like if that expectation needs to be explicitly set, with clients.
Yeah,
Like, yeah, I have an AI package and I will, because I'm really at prompts, so I can create things in AI better than you can. Um,
right.
it's really interesting and also too, like what are you doing to the market if you're then like taking on that $200 work when, you should be pressing them to pay more for it. I feel
Yeah.
like we might get into a world where design as a whole, or maybe even engineering, is devalued because of these things, but I guess time will tell, right?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. It's definitely a problem that's worth watching, right? Because I'm not going to pretend that I have the answers, but I think at some point you have to say to yourself, like, I run an ice cream shop, and I have like there's an ice cream shop that just opened up down the street from me, and I was talking to the owner, and they were saying like how they need to build a website and how frustrating it is because it's not that any one tool is hard. It's just that they don't want to do it, they don't want to
Yes.
learn it, they don't want to be involved in it, but they don't have the budget to hire somebody to do it for them. And so
Mhm.
what do they end up doing? They end up just using a Facebook page, which sucks because as you said in the first episode, right? Like maybe you don't have Facebook, or maybe Facebook decides that your ice cream page doesn't get ranked or whatever, and then all of a sudden you don't have any ownership over that. So, if it means that they are not going to build a website if they don't have that kind of solution, then maybe there is a way to solve for that and
Yeah,
and
sure.
and bring those people in and keep them inside the ecosystem. But I definitely agree that like if we're not careful about it and we position it as unique, bespoke, beautiful designs that I'm just like signing up for a hosting company and just kind of going through their onboarding, and then I present them with a finished website, like did I actually do anything of value, and is that going to actually water down what it means to be a web designer? It could be a real problem.
I mean, you're at that point, it's like you're almost just like a middle person in the
Right.
relationship. You're also very replaceable if AI then takes on the responsibility of doing all these things. So, I mean, I think it's important that everyone find their niche and find irreplaceable qualities in the market, so that
I
doesn't
love
happen.
that. Finding irreplaceable qualities in the side of the market. Jeff, that was the perfect segment to kind of take a break and say goodbye on. Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with
Yeah, thanks for
me
having me. I
and
appreciate it.
share your knowledge with this group of people. If you want to hang out with Jeff more, like I get to, I'm very lucky. Check him out on Blue Sky. What's your handle on Blue Sky?
I am Jeff Golenski everywhere in the world. As far as I know, I'm the only Jeff Golenski. So if you just Google me, any social media, you'll find me. Just look for the guy with the beard and the hair and the glasses.
Nice. All right, cool. Thanks so much, Jeff.
Thanks for having me, man.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Impressive Hosting, where we uncover the core tenets of great WordPress hosting. Do you have a follow up question for today's guest, thought, or comment on anything we talked about, a future guest suggestion, a hosting horror story? What do you think makes great WordPress hosting? All your comments shape this show. Drop them on impressive.host. We also appreciate you following us on social media and subscribing to the podcast on your favorite platform. Finally, do check out our list of open source projects that need support at impressive.host. Whether it's code, community, or cache, you can make a difference. See you next time.